Hell, a place of fiery torment and eternal punishment. That's what we've always believed. But what if I told you that everything you think you know about hell is one gigantic misunderstanding? For 2,000 years, our image of hell has been shaped not by the Bible alone, but by art, literature, and tradition. Here's the shocking truth. Jesus Christ, the very one so often quoted about hell, never described it the way we've been taught to imagine. Today, we'll do something radical. We'll decode ancient Hebrew and Greek texts, uncover forgotten historical evidence, and for the first time, reveal 3 earth-shattering truths about hell. Truths so profound, even leading theologians have been forced to admit them. These truths won't just set you free from unnecessary fear, they'll open your eyes to an entirely new perspective on God's love. A perspective so powerful, it could change your life forever. So, are you ready to confront the truth? Let's dive in. I'm scared of hell. Does God really want to burn people forever? Her innocent question left her mother stunned, her words hanging in the air. How do you explain a concept that theologians have wrestled with for over 2,000 years? Maybe we've been asking the wrong question. Why is it that when we think of hell, we almost automatically picture flames? Why not icy cold like in Norse mythology? Or a barren, endless desert as in ancient Egyptian beliefs? Here's the startling truth. In the oldest biblical texts, the word hell doesn't even exist. Instead, there are 3 entirely different terms: Sheol, Hades, and Gehenna. And here's the shocker, not one of them describes a place of eternal torment. Let's start with Sheol, the earliest term found in the Old Testament. In ancient Hebrew, Sheol isn't fiery or frightening, it simply means the place of silence. Picture a dark, still room. No light, no sound, a space where both the righteous and the wicked go. No flames, no demons, just absence. Here's a mind-blowing fact. King David, a man after God's own heart, spoke openly about going to Sheol. Yes, David, the hero of the Psalms, saw Sheol as an inevitable destination. So what changed? How did Sheol, this quiet place of silence, become the fiery pit so many of us dread? To uncover the answer, we need to rewind to the 3rd century BCE. This was a turning point in history, when Alexander the Great swept across the ancient world, spreading not only armies but Greek language and culture. It was during this time that Sheol met Hades. In Greek mythology, Hades isn't just a location, it's also the name of the god who rules over the dead. When Jewish scholars translated the Hebrew scriptures into Greek in the famous Septuagint, they used Hades to represent Sheol. It seemed like a simple choice. But this single translation unleashed an entire pagan worldview into Jewish thought. Think of it like this. Imagine translating a word like home, which conjures warmth, love, and family, into another language, but the result is fortress. Suddenly, the emotional essence of the word shifts completely. This is exactly what happened to the ancient concept of Sheol. But the evolution doesn't stop there. Enter the New Testament, and with it, a new term, Gehenna. This is where our modern image of hell truly takes root. But here's the jaw-dropping part. Gehenna isn't a mysterious otherworldly place. It's a real location, a valley outside Jerusalem known as the Valley of the Son of Hinnom. This valley had a dark history. It was the site of ancient Canaanite rituals where children were burned alive in worship of the god Molech. Later, it became a massive garbage dump where trash, animal carcasses, and refuse were burned continually to prevent disease. Can you imagine the scene? The choking smoke, the stench of burning waste, fires smoldering day and night. When Jesus spoke of Gehenna, his audience didn't think of an abstract place of eternal punishment. They thought of the burning trash heap they could see and smell from the city walls. It was a vivid, visceral metaphor. But here's the most astonishing part. In every reference Jesus made to Gehenna, he never described it as a place of eternal torment. So if that's not what Jesus meant, then what did he mean? The answer might just transform everything you think you know about hell and everything you think you know about God. Let us journey back to Jerusalem 2,000 years ago. A man stands on a hilltop. Behind him, the bustling city hums with life. Before him, the valley of Gehenna. Dark smoke rises from smoldering heaps of garbage, a haunting, tangible sight. That man is Jesus. And today his words about hell will challenge everything we think we know. Anyone who says to their brother, "You fool," will be in danger of the fire of Gehenna. Pause for a moment. What do these words mean? If taken literally, could a single angry word truly condemn someone to eternal flames? Does that fit the image of a merciful God, the God Jesus so often spoke of? Here's the truth. When Jesus uttered these words, he was standing where his audience could see Gehenna, a burning garbage dump, a stark, unforgettable image to illustrate something far deeper. Jesus wasn't warning about a fiery afterlife. He was teaching a profound truth. Our words hold destructive power. When we let anger and hatred rule us, our lives can become a personal Gehenna, a smoldering wasteland. Look closer. The Aramaic word raka, often translated as fool, meant more than an insult. It stripped away someone's humanity, reducing them to trash. And what burned in Gehenna? Trash. Jesus' message was clear. When we treat others as worthless, we destroy not just them, but ourselves. Now consider another powerful moment. Do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather, fear the one who can destroy both body and soul in Gehenna. Notice something? Jesus speaks of destruction, not eternal torture. Destruction, just like the trash consumed by fire in Gehenna. One story about the afterlife is cited more than any other: the parable of the rich man and Lazarus. For centuries, this has been seen as proof of hell's existence. But did you know? This story wasn't original to Jesus. It was a familiar folk tale, a rich man and a poor man experiencing contrasting fates after death. Jesus took this well-known narrative and transformed it, infusing it with profound meaning. In the original versions, the rich man was punished simply for being rich, while the poor man was rewarded simply for being poor. But Jesus? He reshaped the story entirely. The rich man isn't condemned for his wealth. He's condemned for his indifference. The story isn't about money. It's about failing to see the suffering right in front of us and doing nothing. Pay attention to a key detail. In this parable, Jesus uses the term Hades, not Gehenna. Why? Because he was speaking to the Pharisees, scholars well-versed in Greek culture. By referencing Hades, Jesus used imagery they understood to deliver his lesson. And what's the rich man's final request? He doesn't ask to escape torment. Instead, he begs for Lazarus to warn his brothers. Abraham's response is the heart of the story. If they do not listen to Moses and the prophets, they will not be convinced even if someone rises from the dead. This parable isn't about hell, it's a warning. Don't ignore the call to love, compassion, and justice. If these truths don't change us, nothing will. Consider Jesus' final words about the afterlife, spoken on the cross. To the thief beside him, he didn't speak of punishment or hell. He said, "Today you will be with me in paradise." No waiting, no torment, just peace and presence. Here's the striking truth. In all his teachings, Jesus never describes hell as a place of eternal torture. Not once. No devils, no pitchforks, no medieval horrors. Every mention of Gehenna or Hades serves a purpose, to challenge how we live now. When Jesus spoke of judgment, he used images of separation, wheat from weeds, sheep from goats. These aren't depictions of torment, they're about sorting what has value from what does not. Even the word apolumi, used to describe destruction in Gehenna, carries nuance. It's the same word used for losing a coin or a sheep. It's not about torture, it's about loss, waste. And that leads us to an extraordinary realization. Perhaps the greatest tragedy isn't eternal torment, it's missing our true purpose. When Jesus spoke of losing one's soul, he wasn't warning of fire, he was warning against wasting the divine potential within us. So what happens after we die? Jesus' final lesson may hold the answer. As he faced death, his last words were not about hell, but trust. "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." Could this be the ultimate message? That what matters most isn't where we go, but whom we trust. And yet, if Jesus never intended to teach about eternal torment, how did such a terrifying image take root in Christian faith? And more importantly, if this is true, how does it reshape everything we believe about God, about love, and about the purpose of our lives? In 1321, a literary work forever changed how the world envisioned hell. It wasn't a religious text, nor was its author a theologian. It was the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, a poet in exile, haunted by lost love and personal despair. Dante's vision was unforgettable, a hell with 9 circles, each tailored to a specific sin. The punishments, poetic and brutal. The greedy submerged in molten gold, the lustful tossed in endless chaotic winds, the treacherous frozen in an eternal icy lake. It was a masterpiece of imagination, but also one of the greatest misunderstandings in religious history. Ironically, Dante never meant for his work to be taken literally. The Divine Comedy was a social and political allegory, a way to criticize his enemies and expose the corruption of his time. Yet, like a Hollywood blockbuster that rewrites history, Dante's vivid imagery shaped Western perceptions of hell for centuries to come. But Dante wasn't the first to redefine hell. This transformation began long before him, in a time of upheaval, when the Church faced an empire in ruins. Travel back to the 4th century AD. The Roman Empire is collapsing, and invasions threaten Mediterranean civilization. Amid the chaos, the Church becomes the final anchor of stability. It is here that a monumental shift occurs, spearheaded by a theologian named Augustine. Augustine argued something radical. If souls are immortal, then punishment for sin must also be eternal. This marked a turning point. Before this, many early church fathers, like Origen, believed all souls would eventually be redeemed. But in a world falling apart, the hope of universal salvation seemed too soft. The Church needed a stronger deterrent. Augustine's theory, however, had a glaring issue. It clashed with the Bible's original language. The Greek word apolumi, often translated as destruction, doesn't imply eternal torture. It means loss, ruin, or waste. Still, the concept of eternal torment gained traction. It was an effective tool to uphold moral order, especially in the turbulent Middle Ages. Over time, hell grew darker and more horrifying. Religious art and literature depicted demons, boiling pits of fire, and grotesque punishments. An arms race of hellish creativity emerged. Each generation added new torments, new horrors, and new layers to the inferno. By the late Middle Ages, hell had become so elaborate that its terrifying details seemed biblical, even though none of it originated in Scripture. The Renaissance brought a shift. With the rise of science and humanism, thinkers began questioning hell's logic. How could a God of infinite love allow endless suffering? Could finite sins ever justify infinite punishment? Erasmus, a leading intellectual of the era, posed a daring thought. Perhaps hell is a pedagogical tool, much like parents use tales of monsters to scare children into obedience. This sparked fierce debate. Was hell an allegory meant to teach, or a reality to fear? At the same time, the printing press revolutionized information. Dante's Divine Comedy reached the masses, spreading its vivid hellscape far beyond monasteries and cathedrals. The imagery was unforgettable. Suddenly, the average person's idea of hell wasn't based on Scripture. It was rooted in Dante's imagination. Fast forward to the 20th century. With Hollywood as the new storyteller, hell evolved yet again. No longer just fire and brimstone, it became a metaphor for modern fears. In What Dreams May Come, 1998, hell is depicted as a psychological state, a manifestation of despair and regret. In Constantine, 2005, it's a distorted mirror of our world, twisted by suffering and sin. These interpretations, though modern, echo the original biblical concept. Hell is less a place and more a state of being, a separation, a loss, a self-imposed exile from God, love, and meaning. And this brings us to a profound question. If our concept of hell has shifted so drastically, shaped more by culture and art than by Scripture, what does that mean for our faith? How do we separate divine truth from the layers of human imagination? How can we rediscover the essence of what Jesus taught when centuries of fear, art, and allegory have obscured it? Think about the last time you had a conversation with someone about faith. How quickly did the image of God as a stern judge appear? A figure poised to punish every misstep with eternal damnation? This isn't just a theological debate. It cuts to the heart of how we perceive love itself. Imagine you're a parent. Your daughter makes a mistake. She spills paint on the carpet or tells a lie. You're upset and need to discipline her, but would you lock her in a basement and torture her forever? Of course not. So why do we believe that God, whose love is infinitely greater than any earthly parents, would do such a thing? A young pastor in Seattle decided to challenge this perception. He preached about hell the way Jesus taught it, not as a fiery prison, but as a present reality of waste and ruin. The outcome? Unexpected. Attendance at his church didn't decline. It grew. People weren't turning away from faith. They were being drawn closer, seeing God not as a harsh enforcer but as a loving parent, warning his children about choices that could lead to destruction. This shift matters. Understanding hell, the way Jesus described it, isn't just an intellectual exercise. It transforms how we see God, faith, and even ourselves. When we hear Jesus speak of Gehenna, we no longer imagine a cosmic prison of flames. Instead, we hear a loving caution, a parent saying, "Don't touch that stove, it will burn you." It's not about punishment, it's about protection. This understanding changes everything, including how we share faith with others. Instead of fear-based warnings about hell, we can focus on love, purpose, and restoration. Isn't that closer to how Jesus actually drew people in? Not with threats, but with compassion and mercy. He didn't terrify people into following him, he inspired them. Perhaps the most profound shift occurs in our personal relationship with God. When we no longer see him as a judge waiting to condemn us, the barriers of fear and shame begin to dissolve. Suddenly we can approach him openly, not out of dread, but with a genuine desire to know him. Now think about failure and sin. When we see hell not as a threat, but as the natural result of living apart from God, everything changes. Instead of hiding in fear, we can face our weaknesses honestly. Instead of punishment, we find healing and transformation. Even justice and forgiveness take on new meaning. If God himself doesn't seek eternal revenge, how can we justify clinging to bitterness? We begin to forgive not out of obligation, but because we understand that resentment is its own kind of hell. Bitterness burns within us, consuming our joy and peace. Understanding hell correctly also reshapes our motivation for doing good. We don't act morally to escape punishment. We do so because it leads to a richer, more meaningful life. Think of it like exercise. You don't work out because you fear a penalty. You do it because it makes you feel strong and alive. Similarly, we live morally because it leads to fulfillment and joy, not to avoid flames, but to embrace love. And perhaps most importantly, this understanding frees us to focus on what truly matters, our relationship with God. No longer is faith consumed by fear of hell. Instead, it becomes a journey toward knowing the Creator more deeply, a relationship built on love, trust, and purpose. So here's the real question. If fear of hell isn't the foundation of faith, what is? And how do we live? Not out of fear of punishment, but out of the joy of becoming the people God created us to be. So if hell isn't the eternal torture chamber we've always feared, then what is truly terrifying? Maybe it's not flames or demons. Maybe the most frightening thing is living an entire life trapped in a self-made hell. A life without purpose, without love, without meaning. A life where we imprison ourselves behind walls of loneliness, where bitterness and resentment scorch our hearts, consuming us from the inside. Think about Gehenna, the smoldering garbage dump outside Jerusalem. When Jesus spoke of it, he wasn't issuing a warning about the distant future. He was holding up a mirror to the present. Every day, we encounter small Gehennas in our lives, moments when anger, apathy, or hopelessness turn our lives into something wasted, burned out, and empty. So maybe the question isn't, how do I avoid hell after I die? The real question is, how do I escape the hell I'm creating for myself right now?